The strange thing is, if that silhouette hadn't stepped into the road when it did, I would have driven right past the place where someone was dying and never known how close I came to leaving him there. I was doing a little over 55 miles an hour, 10 minutes past 11:30 p.m. Heading back toward town on a 2-lane Appalachian highway I'd driven 100 times before. No traffic, no cell signal. Just my headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the trees. I remember thinking I should slow down. That thought alone felt out of place. And that's when something stepped into the road. It wasn't a blur or a shadow at the edge of my vision. It was a full silhouette, already there, standing dead center in my lane. I yanked the wheel left on instinct, the cruiser drifting as the tires screamed against the asphalt. The nose missed the figure by what couldn't have been more than a foot, and I slammed the brakes, sliding onto the shoulder hard enough to knock the breath out of me. For a second, I just sat there, hands locked on the steering wheel, heart pounding so violently it blurred my vision. Then I forced myself out of the car and turned back toward the road. The figure was still there, standing upright in my headlights, perfectly still. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman. Too tall to be a kid, no reflective gear, no limp, no reaction at all, and that was the first thing that truly unsettled me. "Hey," I called out, my voice sharper than I felt. "You okay?" No answer, not even a flinch. The figure stood on the faded yellow line like it belonged there, like the road had grown around it. I took a few careful steps closer, every part of me tightening, and noticed something worse. It wasn't swaying, wasn't shifting its weight. It stood like a fixed object, and that's when the silence started to feel intentional. Then slowly, it moved. Not toward me, not away. It turned sideways and began drifting toward the tree line, unhurried, almost casual. I raised my voice again, louder now. But the figure didn't acknowledge me. It reached the edge of the pavement and paused, half lit by my headlights, half swallowed by darkness, and for a split second, I thought it might turn around. It didn't. It stepped off the road and vanished into the woods as if it had never been there at all. I stood alone on the shoulder, the engine ticking as it cooled, the forest pressing in on both sides. Every rational part of me said to get back in the car and leave, but something else, something I couldn't explain, told me that if I drove away now, I'd regret it. I grabbed the flashlight from the passenger seat, the beam slicing through the darkness, and stepped toward the tree line. The woods swallowed the light almost immediately. And with my first step off the pavement, I realized I had no idea what I was about to find, or why I was so certain it wanted me to follow. The woods swallowed the sound first. The hum of the engine, the faint hiss of cooling metal, gone within a few steps. My flashlight beam felt weak out here, cutting a narrow cone through branches and undergrowth before dying against tree trunks and rock. I kept telling myself I was only going a few yards in, just enough to confirm no one was hurt or lost. But with every step, the road felt farther away than it should have. The ground sloped unevenly, leaves slick under my boots, the air damp and heavy. I swept the light left and right, expecting to catch movement, an arm, a shoulder, anything. But there was nothing. No snapped twigs, no hurried footsteps. Whoever, or whatever I'd followed, hadn't pushed through the brush. It was as if the forest had closed behind it, leaving no trace at all. And that realization made my grip tighten on the flashlight. I took another step, then another, and that's when the beam caught something solid. A figure stood ahead between the trees, no more than 20 feet away, fully inside the light this time. My breath stopped. It was a man, or at least shaped like one. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed head to toe in black. A loose hood hung low over his head, swallowing his face completely. No eyes, no mouth, just darkness where features should have been. "Sir," I said, slower now, measured. "You need to come back to the road." He didn't react, didn't turn, didn't even seem to acknowledge that I was there. He stood with his back half turned toward me, angled slightly downhill, like he'd been waiting for me to catch up, and that thought sent a cold wave through my chest. I shifted my stance, scanning around him, checking the trees, the ground, anything that might explain how he'd gotten there so quietly. When I looked back, he had moved, just enough to face me fully. Still no face. Still nothing inside the hood but black, absorbing the light instead of reflecting it. And for the first time, I felt the urge to reach for my radio and call for backup. Instead, the man raised his arm. The motion was slow and deliberate, almost careful. He extended one finger and pointed past me, then down, holding the gesture steady. My flashlight followed his hand before I consciously decided to move it. The beam slid across dirt and roots, then stopped abruptly at open space. The ground dropped away just a few feet ahead, an abrupt edge where the forest ended in darkness. My stomach tightened. I stepped closer, heart pounding, and angled the light downward. The beam fell onto jagged rock and then farther, catching the metallic outline of something unnatural below. I sucked in a sharp breath and snapped the light back up toward the man. He was gone. No sound, no movement, no retreat through the trees. 1 second he stood there, pointing, and the next there was nothing but empty air and swaying branches. I stood frozen, listening, waiting for some sign I hadn't imagined it, but the woods offered nothing back. Slowly, carefully, I turned my attention to the edge again. Now that I knew it was there, I could make out more. The drop wasn't sheer, but steep, and off to the side I could see a narrow, sloping path cutting its way down through brush and rock. Whatever lay below that ledge hadn't ended up there by accident. And whatever that man had been, he hadn't led me into the woods by mistake. The beam of my flashlight finally settled enough for my eyes to understand what I was seeing. A pickup truck lay upside down on a narrow rock shelf below the ledge, no more than 10 to 15 feet down, its roof crushed inward, its rear wheels hanging over nothing. It hadn't fallen all the way, yet. One bad shift of weight and it would slide off the rock entirely and disappear into the ravine below. I scanned the area, pulse hammering. That's when I noticed the narrow path cutting down along the side of the ledge. Steep, uneven, but passable. I didn't hesitate. I moved fast but careful, boots sliding on dirt and loose stone, one hand steadying myself against trees as I descended. Halfway down I heard it, a faint metallic creak, the sound of a vehicle settling under its own weight, and it pushed me to move faster. When I reached the truck, my flashlight swept across shattered glass and bent metal before landing inside the cab. A man hung upside down in the driver's seat, seatbelt biting into his torso, his head angled at an unnatural position. He looked to be in his early 40s, face pale, eyes closed. For a split second, I thought I was too late. I reached in and pressed my fingers to his neck. A pulse. Weak, but there. "Hey," I said, louder now. "Stay with me." No response. His chest barely moved. I braced myself against the door frame and worked the seatbelt free inch by inch, supporting his weight as best I could. The moment it released, I pulled him clear and dragged him several feet away from the truck, my arms burning by the time I lowered him onto the ground. I had just stepped back when the rock beneath the pickup gave way. The truck shifted violently, metal shrieking as it slid off the ledge. I stumbled backward, barely keeping my footing as it disappeared from sight, tumbling end over end into the darkness below. The sound of the impact came seconds later, dull, final, echoing through the ravine. If I'd been even a moment slower, that man would have gone with it. I stood there, breathing hard, staring into the dark where the truck had been. Then I looked back up toward the tree line above the ledge. The spot where the man in the hood had stood was empty, just trees and shadow. But the feeling lingered, heavy and undeniable. He hadn't warned me. He hadn't attacked me. He had pointed. I got the injured man back up the trail and called for medical support once I had a signal. He survived. Broken ribs, a concussion, nothing that would have killed him if help arrived in time. Officially, it was a late-night accident on a dangerous stretch of road. That's all it ever was on paper. But I know the truth. If that silhouette hadn't stepped into the road when it did, I never would have stopped. I never would have followed it into the woods, and I never would have been standing at that ledge when a life was hanging on it. I still drive that highway. And every time I pass that stretch of road late at night, I slow down. Not because I'm afraid of hitting someone again, but because I'm afraid of seeing where he might be pointing next. If this story unsettled you, leave a like and let the shadows know. Subscribe for more tales you shouldn't hear after dark. And if you've seen something you can't explain, tell us in the comments. We're always listening.